All right, this one is dedicated to all the grouse hunters out there. This is one of my favorites. This is a classic in the world of ruffed grouse literature. This is a chapter from the book My Friend the Partridge by S.T. Hammond. This was published way back in 1908. This is chapter 2 called The Ruffed Grouse. The ruffed grouse in New England, commonly called partridge, is the very best game bird that inhabits this continent. I say this advisedly and without fear of contradiction from any sportsman who has hunted them enough to become fairly well acquainted with their habits and is at all expert in their capture. Many writers insist that this royal bird is a very unsatisfactory one to pursue for sport, and they have written columns in its vilification, and are unsparing in its epithets, condemning some of its characteristic habits, all of which goes to prove conclusively that these same writers have scant knowledge of the subject upon which they have wasted so much valuable ink. I love that. I have many times been greatly amused to witness the sudden change in the opinion of one of these outspoken gentlemen, when given opportunity to participate in the pleasure that comes to those only who dearly love the fascinating sport, and have learned by a large experience some, at least, of the many interesting traits and habits that are a part of life of this truly royal inhabitant of the forests that crown with glory our beautiful hills and mountains. A brief period with the expert grouse hunter in the haunts of his favorite bird will nearly always prove to the cynic or tyro that there is a hitherto undreamed of wealth of sport and pleasure in the pursuit of this splendid bird. And if he is possessed of true sportsmanlike instinct and has patience to persevere, his reward is sure, and regal sport awaits his pleasure. The late Honorable George Ashman, than whom more finished gentleman or truer sportsman never went afield, was not in his earlier days a lover of the partridge in the way of sport. He was often the shooting companion of the immortal Webster, and the only criticism of the great statesman that I ever heard him utter was that he loved the partridge, quote unquote, not wisely, but too well. That's good too. My first two shooting expeditions with Mr. Ashman were devoted to woodcock covers, and no attempt was made to search for grouse. Of course, we took an occasional shot at them when we found them, intruding, as he called it, on the woodcock grounds. But his distaste for following them was so pronounced that I rather reluctantly suppressed my inclinations and devoted my time to his favorite bird, the woodcock. The third time we were out together, we visited the quaint old town of Holland in the southern portion of the old Bay State, a town that can boast more ragged rocks and rugged hills to the square acre than any town I know that holds, or rather did hold, so many birds. On this occasion, we very fortunately found one of his favorite woodcock covers without a single longbill. But we did find a noble covey of grouse that flushed wild and settled in some small detached patches of dense cover that looked most promising. With the most serious expression of countenance and voice that I could assume, I launched torrents of abuse at the intruding grouse for usurping the ground that was the birthright of the woodcock. Then, as the next friend of the evicted innocents, I appealed to my companion, as a lawyer, for advice as to the proper course to pursue. With a merry twinkle in his eye and a broad smile upon his countenance, he took a firmer grasp of his gun, and in a melodramatic tone he exclaimed, Fiat justitia ruat calum. Then we went for those intruders, and for more than 2 hours we reveled in the enjoyment of such sport as only comes to the elect when, with congenial companion, the best dog in the world, beautiful surroundings, plenty of birds, and straight powder, he adds one more priceless gem to the store of memories that shall come back to cheer and bless his joyless hours when shooting days are over. That's so good. Mr. Ashman, as he afterward acknowledged, proposed going for the birds more to please me than with any thought of sport. He well knew that the royal bird had the warmest corner in my heart, and that every nerve in my frame was still vibrating with responsive echo of the music of the quickly beating pinions. I plainly saw that his countenance lacked the animated expression that illuminated it when following his favorite bird, and it was with unbounded pleasure and satisfaction that I noted the gradual change in his features as the sport became more and more exciting, until even the woodcock expression was intensified and glorified, and I did not need the assurance he gave to know that he too had become a partridge crank. Mr. Ashman never forsook his first love, the woodcock, but ever after this he had a good word for the bird he had so often condemned, and was always ready to try conclusions with them. I could record scores of similar instances, for I have very many times had the pleasure of witnessing such change of heart. But perhaps I have said enough to illustrate the point I wished to make out relative to the great love for the sport of grouse shooting that comes to those who have opportunity to enjoy the pleasure that attends successful pursuit of this wise and wary will-o'-wisp of the tangled thicket. The life history of the ruffed grouse has never been written. Many deeply interesting sketches of portions of it have from time to time been placed before us, but never a comprehensive and truthful description of the going and coming, the likes and dislikes, the resultant effects of unnatural conditions, as well as 1,001 other items of interest that all belong to the daily life of this preternaturally wise and most interesting bird. Many years ago, I took no little pride in the belief that I knew about all that was worth knowing in relation to this bird. But as the years rolled on, I learned, and enjoyed pleasure in the learning, that my boasted knowledge was in truth insignificant. And the more I learned of the habits and characteristics of my wily favorite, the less inclined was I to make a fool of myself by pretension to knowledge that I knew was far removed from perfection. Each season, for more than half a century, I have devoted considerable time to the pursuit of my favorite bird, and I believe myself to be fairly proficient in their capture. But even now, with all my experience, they often get the best of me by playing me some new dodge or trick, and so well do I know them that I feel sure that no matter how proficient I may become, their wits, sharpened by experience, will often cause me sorrow as I realize that I have again been outwitted. That is The Ruffed Grouse by S.T. Hammond, which is a chapter from his book, My Friend the Partridge, Memories of New England Shooting. And this is one of my favorite books of all time. It's a classic in the world of upland hunting literature, specifically the classic books about ruffed grouse hunting. S.T. Hammond wrote this book and published it in, I believe it was 1908. It was published by a company called the Forest and Stream Publishing Company in New York. And it kind of inspired and is included in one of the, or in many of the ruffed grouse books that were published many, many years ago in New England. Other authors that come to mind off the top of my head are like Bert Spiller and William Harnden Foster. And then, interestingly, George Bird Grinnell, who is one of those authors, wrote the foreword for this book and talked about S.T. Hammond and gave some details about him. And a couple comments he made I thought were really, really interesting. One was he praised Hammond's upland hunting abilities. He said he is one of the most expert of expert wing shots. He said Mr. Hammond was born in 1831. He hunted game across the United States when he was young. Let's see, a couple other interesting things. He was married in 1861, had 8 children. In 1881, he became the kennel editor of Forest and Stream, which I'm not familiar with, but probably was a hunting publication back then. He wrote multiple books. And then one thing that struck me, I thought this was really interesting. The last paragraph of George Bird Grinnell's foreword in Hammond's book, My Friend the Partridge, he says, of late years, Mr. Hammond has resided in Springfield, where he has worked in the United States Armory. 2 years ago, while at work, he fell from a bench and smashed his ankle so badly that he will be a cripple for life. But he hunts partridge just the same. I thought that was fantastic. And the thing I like about these books, and as you can tell when you're reading them and when you're listening to them, is the prose, the writing, the creativity of the way they wrote back in the early 1900s compared to what we have now is absolutely fantastic. You know, with technology and email and social media, um, you know, writing, in my opinion, is kind of becoming a thing of the past. People care less about creative writing. They care less about grammar. They care less about long form storytelling, like some of these authors I just mentioned. And it's, you know, everybody's sending out a quick email or tweeting something, right? Or texting, constantly texting with emojis and you know, the proper grammar, the creative storytelling, the prose, the art of writing, I think is something that we need to celebrate a little more. So it's fun to read these old books. It's fun to kind of study these old authors and really appreciate their creative storytelling for what it is. And so that's one of the reasons why I started doing this, and one of the reasons that inspires me to write myself, but also one of the reasons why it's fun to have these stories available for people to listen to from some of these authors like Mr. Hammond, and I'm going to do some hunting articles from Theodore Roosevelt and hopefully some other hunting authors. And what I like to do is like listen to podcasts on my way to my hunting spot. Or if I'm traveling all the way out to Montana, I'd like to listen to hunting podcasts and things like that. So if you like these old stories, they're kind of like songs to me, right? It takes between 5 and 12 minutes to listen to one of these stories. And so that's kind of what I'm treating it as. Hopefully people are appreciating this and listening to these stories. And hopefully it celebrates, you know, writing and good storytelling going forward. So that's it from me. Thanks again. That was The Ruffed Grouse in the book My Friend the Partridge by S.T. Hammond.